Welcome to Epic Grand Tales. Like this video and subscribe for more true and inspirational stories. My name is Kimberly and I am 75 years today. I am here to share with you what I passed through as a teenager. I was 9 when Daniel came to live with us. It was early summer, the kind of humid June that made the air feel like a wet towel you couldn't shake off. School had just ended, and I was still glowing with the joy of no more homework, bike rides with my best friend Lena, and long, sticky popsicles melting down my fingers. Then my mom sat me down at the kitchen table with her serious voice. The same one she used when Grandma got sick, or when we had to cancel Christmas because money was tight. "Daniel's coming to stay for a while," she said gently, folding her hands like she always did when she was bracing for my reaction. "Just for the summer?" I asked. She hesitated. "Maybe longer." Daniel was 16. I barely knew him beyond the brief moments we'd spent at holiday dinners. He never smiled, never played with the other kids. I remembered the way he once snapped at me for touching his phone at Thanksgiving, the way his voice didn't sound like it belonged to a kid at all, too cold, too measured. Still, I didn't argue. I didn't ask why his mom wasn't with him, or why he seemed to drift like a ghost through every family gathering. I was taught to be polite, to make room, to share. So I did. The first few weeks were uneventful. Daniel kept mostly to himself, earbuds constantly stuffed into his ears, hoodie pulled over his face even in the heat. At dinner, he didn't speak unless spoken to. At night, he watched TV in the living room while I went to bed early, happy to escape his heavy presence. But then came the first time. It was a Saturday. My parents had gone to a wedding across town, leaving Daniel to babysit me. I was excited, oddly enough. I thought we might finally do something together, like normal cousins. Instead, he called me into the living room and told me we were going to play a game. "A grown-up game," he said. "Just for us. You can't tell your mom." I don't remember every detail of what happened that night. But I remember the feeling. That sick, sinking feeling in my stomach. The way my heart raced in a way it never had before. The way my voice caught in my throat when I tried to say no, but it came out as a whisper he ignored. When my parents came home, I was already in bed. I pretended to be asleep. My mom kissed my forehead and turned out the light. She didn't know that I lay awake all night, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand why I felt so broken inside. I didn't tell. Because I didn't have the words. Because I thought it was my fault. Because Daniel said no one would believe me. After that night, something in me shifted. I didn't cry, not at first. Instead, I felt like I'd swallowed something dark and heavy. A stone lodged deep in my chest. I went quiet. Quieter than usual. I still played with Lena, still smiled when my mom looked at me, but it was the kind of smile that felt like holding your breath underwater. Tight. Forced. Fragile. Daniel acted like nothing had happened. He'd ruffle my hair in front of my parents, joke about how I never stopped reading, and smile in a way that made my skin crawl. He had a way of standing just close enough that I'd flinch without knowing why. A way of looking at me like I was a secret he owned. The worst part? No one noticed. Not my mom, who was working 2 jobs and often came home too tired to see the shadows in my eyes. Not my dad, who was kind but distant, always lost in the hum of the evening news. And not even Lena, who once asked why I didn't laugh as much anymore. I wanted to tell someone. God, I wanted to scream. But I didn't have the words. I didn't know how to say, "My cousin is hurting me in a way that makes me feel like I'm disappearing." So I said nothing. And he kept going. It wasn't every day. Sometimes weeks would pass and I'd start to believe it was over. That maybe he had stopped, maybe it was just a one-time thing. But then something would shift in his eyes, and I'd know, deep down, that I wasn't safe. He always waited until the house was empty. He always made sure I knew what would happen if I told. "You'd ruin everything," he whispered once. "Your mom loves me. You'd break her heart." I believed him. I was 9. And I believed him. By the time I turned 10, I'd become a master at pretending. I smiled at the right moments, laughed when I was supposed to, and did well in school. I kept my grades up because I thought that if I was perfect, maybe the bad things would stop. But inside, I was slowly disappearing. At night, I'd lie awake and count the stars on my bedroom ceiling stickers, one by one, until I felt nothing. I became obsessed with silence. I would tiptoe through the house, breathe as quietly as possible, fold myself into the smallest corners. Because silence made me feel safe. Because silence made me invisible. I started avoiding hugs, even from my parents. I hated the feeling of being touched, even kindly. I would flinch when people moved too fast. My mom thought I was just sensitive. My dad told me to toughen up. How could they not see? How could they not feel it? The house was full of noise, but my pain lived in the silence between all the sounds. I stopped looking in mirrors. I didn't like the girl staring back. It wasn't a scream that broke me. It wasn't a slap, or a cry, or even a threat. It was a question. I was 12, sitting at the edge of the soccer field during lunch. I wasn't playing, as usual. I was hugging my knees, watching the clouds roll by, pretending they could carry me somewhere else. Lena sat beside me. We hadn't been as close lately. I kept pulling away, but she never stopped trying. "You okay?" she asked quietly, chewing her apple. "You're always somewhere else lately." I didn't answer right away. I was used to lying by then. But she leaned closer and said something I didn't expect. "Did someone hurt you?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. She didn't mean a scraped knee or a playground fight. She meant the kind of hurt I didn't think anyone could see. Something inside me cracked. I didn't cry. Not then. But I remember nodding. Just once. Barely noticeable. Lena didn't push me. She didn't ask for details. She just scooted closer, shoulder to shoulder, and sat with me in silence. That night, I wrote in my journal for the first time in months. "I think I want to tell someone." The idea felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. Terrifying. Impossible. But maybe it was time. I didn't tell my parents. Not at first. I couldn't. The fear was still too big. But I did the next best thing. I told a teacher. Her name was Ms. Reyes. She taught English and wore cardigans with butterflies on them. I don't know why I picked her. Maybe it was the softness in her voice, or the way she never rushed anyone. One afternoon, I stayed behind after class and asked if I could talk. She closed the door and sat across from me. I didn't say everything. Just enough. "I don't feel safe at home," I whispered. She didn't ask me to explain right away. She didn't try to fix it. She just looked at me with so much kindness that the walls I'd built began to crumble. She brought in a school counselor. Then a social worker. Then, finally, my parents. It was messy. So much crying. So many questions I couldn't answer all at once. But for the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight alone. Daniel was removed from our home that same week. He denied everything. Of course he did. Said I was making it up. Said I was troubled. But I didn't care anymore. I wasn't doing this for revenge. I was doing it for the girl who had counted stars to survive. Healing didn't happen overnight. It took years. Therapy helped. At first, it was terrifying, saying out loud the things I'd buried. But slowly, piece by piece, I began to take my story back. I began to understand that what happened wasn't my fault. That I wasn't dirty. That I wasn't broken beyond repair. My relationship with my parents changed. They felt guilt, anger, confusion. But we worked through it, sometimes slowly, sometimes with yelling, sometimes with tears that lasted hours. They believed me. That mattered more than I can explain. And Lena. She never left. She stuck around through the awkward silences and the shaky laughter. She held my hand during every court appearance. She reminded me who I was before the silence took over. For so long, I thought what happened to me was who I was. But healing taught me otherwise. I learned that trauma may shape part of your story, but it doesn't own your identity. I was not what Daniel did to me. I was not a victim forever stuck in the past. I was a survivor. And more than that, I was a person rebuilding a life on my own terms. In therapy, we talked a lot about trust. About control. About reclaiming the pieces I thought were lost. It was hard work, exhausting, terrifying at times, but somewhere in those hours of reflection, I found pieces of myself I'd forgotten. I started writing again. Not just journals, but stories. Poetry. Essays. At first, they were angry. Then they were sad. Then they were beautiful. One of my poems won a school contest. I remember standing at the front of the assembly hall, reading it out loud. My hands shook. My throat burned. But I didn't stop. The applause felt like a thunderstorm breaking through years of silence. It wasn't until college that I shared my full story publicly. There was a campus event about surviving childhood trauma. A few students stood up and read anonymous letters, most of them typed and handed to the counselor beforehand. But I wanted to be seen. Not as a victim. As a whole person. When I walked to the podium and said my name, my real name, there was a pause in the room. And then I spoke. I told them about the silence. The games. The fear. And I told them how I survived. How I learned to speak. How I learned that my story wasn't shameful, it was powerful. Afterward, people came up to me. Some were crying. Some just said thank you. Others whispered, me too. I didn't realize it until then, but telling my story wasn't just healing for me. It was hope for someone else. After college, I started volunteering at a center for survivors of abuse. I trained as a peer counselor. Eventually, I got certified in trauma-informed support. Now, I work with teens, kids who remind me of myself at 9, 10, 12. Kids who sit too quietly. Kids who jump at sudden sounds. Kids who carry stories in their eyes that no one has asked to hear. And I listen. I let them speak on their terms. I let them cry. I let them rage. I let them be. Because someone once did that for me. Today, I live in a small apartment with big windows. I fill the walls with books and photos of the people who never let go of me. I laugh loudly. I love deeply. I trust again, slowly, carefully, but with courage. I still have bad days. Triggers. Flashbacks. But I also have tools, people, and above all, a voice that no one can ever silence again. If you're reading this and you're still carrying your silence, you are not alone. What happened to you was not your fault. And there is healing. It's not easy. It's not quick. But it is real. Your story matters. And one day, when you're ready, Someone will need to hear it. Thanks for listening and stay blessed.